How are you?
Excellent. How are
Thanks
you?
so much for coming on. It's a pleasure. I know you're so busy. You're working at RMC right now on the base. So we were talking to Tanya offset, and it's incredible. You're on the move all the time. You're going all over the place. What does a day look like to you? What do you do?
There's a lot going on. You're absolutely right. I think there's a lot going on for women in general these days, whatever it is we're doing. But in terms of business, I seem to have streamed into a number of different businesses, all media background.
Which is exciting.
It is, and I think that's one thing I say to people too who are looking at getting into business for themselves is the whole idea about know your strengths and stay in those streams. And these days, who among us really is working at a 30, 40-year job at the same thing all the time? So I have streamed what I do, and so one of the things I do is I report to CBC. I have a regular show that I've done for a long time on the radio.
So cool.
Yeah, it's lovely. I really enjoy it. I've done it for a number of years, and Claire, it really has given me profile, and it regardless of whether people like it or don't like it, the Kingston Report they associate with me, which means that everything else I have sort of spawned off and done, they already know me, and that's okay. It could be a good no, but it could be a bad no, but they know the name, and I think that's a critical part of how I've been able to sort of weave what I do, and it all sort of works together.
And I think that's awesome, because I think when people hear you're doing all these different things, a lot of people would always ask, like, how did you get into all of them? But like you said, CBC was your foundation. People got to know you there, a huge platform to reach out, and then it's turned into all these things. So what's really inspired you? Because you jumped on early working for yourself. What was the main inspiration for you, being an entrepreneur today, working for yourself, getting all these clients?
It's almost a process of evolution, because I did work at CTV. I co-hosted a show, and somehow it was fun. I loved it, but I almost felt the writing on the wall. I almost felt like things were changing. There wasn't going to be that permanent job, and you almost had to start thinking for yourself. Okay, what am I going to do? Because and now we're at that stage. Now I look and I see some of my colleagues are in working in newspapers, working in television, and they're losing their jobs, and that's sad. For me, it was a process of evolution, and I thought, well, I like what I do, so why don't I turn that into something else? CBC, there was at that time a void. Nothing was being reported from Kingston, and for other people going into business, it could be something else. It could be that there isn't something creative being done here. Maybe I could do it. Maybe I could make a product that isn't being done in Kingston. I know you and I were talking earlier about sort of smaller or mid-sized cities as compared to a Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. Well, in a smaller community, you can kind of look and say, what void could I fill there? So that's what I did with CBC, and because of CBC, it kind of taught me, how do you talk to journalists? How do you do it? So now I also turn around and teach other people how to talk to journalists. And the military then said, well, what about coming to do what you do for us on training exercises? And I also work in film. So I'm in a couple of things right now. Actually, I'm in Schitt's Creek, an episode, and Ransom. Yeah, and I don't see television.
It's going really well. Congrats, because that's awesome.
Thank you.
Family friends, Annie Murphy.
Oh.
Yeah, she's killing it. That's awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah,
That's cool.
It's nice. It's a small part of a small piece of what I do, but yeah, it's lovely. I enjoy it.
You were saying, and I find people like you really fascinating, because you said you felt that things were changing, and I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to. It's almost like they can sense the future a bit. They can feel where things are moving. What kind of indications? Because a lot of people are like, how do you know times are going to change? How do I know when to predict to jump into something else? What kind of indications in that job made you feel, okay, I need to start maybe hustling on my own and doing my own thing? How did you know?
Well, television has been evolving over so many years now, and television was once this big, huge production with studio directors and camera people everywhere, and production assistants and makeup artists. And for me, I could see it shrinking, and so it's a different dynamic.
In some way, and then growing in other ways.
Exactly,
right?
and changing.
The
and
Netflix generation.
Netflix, and more people are doing online shows, and so
This is it.
right, exactly. And you're doing such a fabulous job. I mean, I think I so admire what you've done, because I look at your product and I say, well, that's sensing there's a need there, and so you've jumped into it and you're making it work. And how great is that? So I think for me that's kind of what happened too. The other thing though is I think something in me said, I don't necessarily want to punch someone else's clock every day. I want to be able to do it myself. And that is not to say that there are lean times. There are times when you think, is there going to be something around that corner? So for me, it's always been a matter of having several irons in the fire, several, whether it's film, coaching, the military, CBC, having a bunch of stuff, because I don't think one thing is going to do it these days.
No, and it doesn't also for your creativity, for keeping inspired, it doesn't. But yeah, you're right. We were talking about this. It's a balancing act, trying to find, lining things up. And we were saying working for yourself can be tiring, just the scheduling, just planning where things are going to go. So it's awesome. And you mentioned, I wanted to pick this back up, you talked about, working in big cities, and here we are in Kingston. Kingston is considered a smaller city. It's and everyone that comes here, it's a very small town feel, which is awesome. What do you notice is the biggest part with your work? What do you love about working in a small town or small city versus going to the big cities? Or can you have both?
I think you can have both. Well, first of all, you know this as well as I do. Geographically, we are situated so easily. We're right on the 401. We can be in Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, and I don't do so much work in Montreal, but both Ottawa and Toronto, and I do work in the States.
Well, in New York City, you're really not that far.
No, we're very fortunate geographically, but I also think in terms of working in a smaller area, you really can be a little bit of a big fish in a smaller pond, right? So you have a little bit of individuality. And what's happening in Kingston now, as you know, is there's this whole feeling of innovation. Everything is.
So you feel.
Yes.
That's what I keep telling them. Like, guys, Kingston's got something.
It is.
Because I've been here for the last 7 years. I've lived here my whole life, but I went away, and since coming home, that's what. And so it's nice to hear you can feel it too. I'm like, Kingston's got something going, and there's young people coming back. People are doing things, and it's exciting.
It is exciting, and I think there's a sort of a networking kind of happening, and there's a pulse, and it's building. And that doesn't mean to say we as a city are becoming large. We don't need to become large. I think we want to maintain that sort of mid-size and that beauty, because Kingston is beautiful. But I think what's happening is there's a networking of all the different groups, a promotion of let's try this and let's be innovative. Innovate Kingston is a group doing it. So there is a feeling that you can do it here. Now, on the other hand, I don't know if other people feel this, but I know that sometimes fees are different. So if you think that you're charging a certain amount of money in Toronto and then you send out that same fee schedule, it ain't going to happen, because the feel is not here, and people are not accustomed to it. So I think you have to sort of be realistic as well.
Yeah, and that's really neat, and I think that's a huge thing, right? Why people go to the city thinking, but then you're drowning in sometimes noise, and you come home and you're like, oh, JC's the only one in Kingston. Like, you're representing your brand here. You're the one person here. So that's awesome.
Well, and I also do think, Claire, that it takes a while. It takes a while to break in, and I don't know exactly if that's the same if you face the same challenges in a larger city, but I know that in Kingston, you need to belong to certain groups. You need to be networking. You need to do all that, because it's a city that knows itself, and people are linked. If you're on the outside, on the periphery of that, you may feel it. So you've got to do your homework, and you've got to be connected with people and get to know them, so that they have a level of trust in you, and then they'll buy into your brand.
I love that. And can you share with us what you say? Do your homework, because I think a lot of people. I've had people come up to me like, Claire, can you help me network? And I'm like, you're like. Oh, it's like, what is entrepreneurship, right? It's like, it depends on your personality, who you are. What works for you for staying on the pulse? What's your homework? What are you always pushing yourself to kindness? How do you stay connected?
It's tricky, and I know one example I can give you is the group Kingston Sales and Marketing.
Okay.
And I think what you have to do is come, it's a monthly group.
Okay, I'm like, there's all these groups.
I know.
Okay.
There's so much out there, but I think you have to come into these groups, whatever they might be, whether it's She Connects or any of the business networks for women or for both.
Yeah.
You have to come into it not saying, what can I do for myself, but what can I also do to help the other people? Because, for instance, with Kingston Sales and Marketing, yeah, it's great for me. You get to sort of promote. But what I feel about that is I like to go and promote others at the group as well and watch their presentations and give them some sort of support if I can, even just to be there and watch what they do and let them do their spiel. So I think you have to partly say to yourself, I'm there because I want to support my colleagues and my fellow people. And part of it is that you're going to garner something out of that too.
Totally.
It's going to be good for you.
Yeah, so you're always, and I think I remember having a mentor always saying, you know, you really have to give before you can ask to take. And I think, especially in a small town or a small city, you know, that word of mouth is sometimes much more powerful, right, than putting something on Facebook or whatever. Like, it's the one-on-one conversations for sure are huge.
Yes, I think they're very important. I think, but you mentioned Facebook and you mentioned online. I think that's really important too.
Yeah,
and it is.
They gotta go hand in hand.
They've got to go hand in hand, and I also think people need to have a direction. Like, I find that when you're doing online branding or online marketing, it's really important to know ahead of time what are you doing.
Yeah.
And what I did early on, well, not that early, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah, exactly.
You're always changing.
You're always changing.
Instagram wasn't a thing when you started.
Exactly.
Right? So now you're like, I have a new audience. I have a new way of interacting.
Yeah. So I hired someone who had expertise in that area, and I sat with her, and she said, be clear about what you're going to do. So to me, be clear is, and she said, be clear on your CBC side, be clear on your coaching side, be clear. So for me, that's always meant, don't mix up the whole, for me it's meant, don't mix up the whole social scene and what's my 13-year-old doing, what are my cats doing.
Yeah.
I leave that off because I think if people want to know me professionally, that's what they're looking for. And confusing it with all the other stuff and the chatter in the background doesn't work for me.
I love that you said that, because I think that's been really something I've learned. I remember when I was in university, and you go onto Facebook and you're like, there's just conversations of everyone doing everything, and I was like, okay, Facebook is going to be a great tool one day for business, and I was like, okay, you almost have to decide what's not going to be posted, because is it going to help your business or is it going to help your brand? And I remember that there's a lot of times you just want to share things because you're excited. You're like, what does this have anything to do with my brand?
With my brand.
And it's tough because you're excited, but then you're like, no, that's what having friends and sharing one-on-one. And I think that's really important, is what you said, is keeping, knowing your vision and making sure you're going there. So can I ask you, what's your direction? Like, where are you hoping to go with, in JC, what's JC in 5-10 years?
Well,
I know that's a big question. You're
I know.
You don't have, what's your dream? Where do you want it? Where do you see? I mean, that hair could take you anywhere.
Thank you. Well, likewise.
Oh my God, I just want to touch it.
I'll tell you, no, I saw your hair and I thought, it took me a lot of years to recognize that I wasn't going to be blonde. And I wasn't going to have that perfect hair.
No. This thing, we had some work on it.
Oh, well, it looks great. And I mean, let's face it, hair is important. I mean, isn't it?
It's another piece of clothing.
Yeah, it is.
It's another decoration.
And I realized that early on doing coaching, that coaching is about how you present yourself, it's about what you say, but it's equally about how you present yourself. And so for me, hair is, and probably for you, your hair is part of your brand. You just recognize that that's the way it's going to be. But
my friends are probably listening, shaking their head.
But it's true, and you just sort of recognize it. You say, this is what I've got, and this is what I'm going to live with, and I'm going to make it part of who I am. But I think 5 or 10 years, same sort of thing. I mean, for now, I feel very fortunate. For instance, I'm doing a lot of coaching with the city of Kingston,
That's so
and
nice.
I'm doing more and more. And how privileged I feel to that they've asked me to do that. I think it's terrific. So more of that kind of thing. I do love working for the military.
That's cool. I know that's in news. When they said that, I was like, that's awesome, and that's a whole nother world.
It's a whole other world.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily go to places that people might be envious of. Okay, Petawawa, Valcartier.
You know what? You never know.
But all corners of the world are great. So
are there any cool projects within these that you want to share? Because everyone's like, okay, well, what's something you're working on? Like you mentioned CBC, everyone's like, wow, and working on Schitt's Creek and doing all this stuff. What's one of the jobs that have been really exciting for you that you've loved being part of?
Well, I recently was in. I go every year to Colorado, Springs, and it is lovely.
I was there 2 years ago.
It's a gorgeous part of the world, and I work with NORAD down there, and it's an international exercise.
What's it called? Sorry.
NORAD.
Okay.
So it's part of the more global military, if you will.
Okay.
So we work a lot with other, a lot of departments across the United States, military. So my function down there is to be, I'm an American reporter, even though I'm coming from Canada, but they've got a full slate of studios, and we package shows every day. I absolutely love it. It's long hours, but it's fabulous. Right now, I'm on an exercise that's in Kingston, and we're training a large audience, mostly from the Air Force. And again, we're putting out products that are print, like we might do a newspaper article, and we're letting them know that when they go to their theater of war, we will, the media will be there, the real media will be there, but we are there to do that. So
that's a huge group of people coming together, and you're in touch with the world that obviously I would never see, most people would never see. So it's kind of the exclusives, right, behind it all. That's cool.
Yeah, it really is great.
Anyone that's listening to you right now speaking, you have this presence about you that's calm, but you're confident, and it's really nice. You have a great tone of voice too.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of people, want to get that to that point in their life, but they struggle and they don't know where to start. Where did your confidence come from to do this? Because this is a huge thing that you're training other people to be really confidence in communication, right?
Yes.
So what is it? What's the secret for you having your own confidence, and what would you share with other people to build their confidence?
First of all, I think it takes time, Claire. I think it takes time. And I think for me, I got to a stage in what I'm doing that I feel a steadiness in what I'm doing. And other people may reach it before I did, but to walk into a room where you've got say 20 people who are all looking at you, waiting for you to coach them, and if you don't feel confident, well, in other words, you have to, because because that lack of confidence or that unsteady foundation is going to come from me. So it's knowing, it's being secure in the knowledge that my experience is what people have brought me there for. And so I'm going to impart this knowledge, whether I believe that it's amazing or not. I'm going to impart it. And the other thing that I've done, which sounds really kind of simple, I've slowed down my speech. And my own speech, I tell people all the time, slow down. And I've slowed down my own speech. When people speak really quickly, and it kind of belies a nervousness. So if you're doing something,
I feel like I need to catch up, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't think as fast.
You can't
as you're
think.
Talking.
Yes.
Okay. And because that's why I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm feeling so relaxed. I'm thinking this is nice, and what is okay. That's a great thing, because I think also when you're speaking, you think you're going slower than you are. Right?
Yes.
When you're nervous, you start going.
And you want people to understand you. And so if you are somewhere, and you're speaking to a group of people, they've come to listen to you. So why would you speed up? They need to catch what you're saying. You could have people in the audience who have hearing issues. You could have people who they're not quite catching it because they're thinking about something else. That happens on television all the time.
That's me all
the
time.
Yes. And so you miss things. So slowing down, also listening and grace. Those are key areas that I talk about too, is using manners. Differentiate yourself because you're using manners, you're treating people with grace. Most people want to talk about themselves. So be the person who doesn't, be the person who asks something else, who goes outside of yourself, and so they'll remember you. In your wake, as you walk away, they will remember you because you left grace with them, you used your manners, and a lot of people aren't these days. So I think that's another thing that's important. Be confident in who you are, but be confident and believe in your brand, believe in who you are, believe in what you're selling, and firmly believe it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And I like that because, you know, a lot of people thinking building your confidence is talking about yourself and trying to convince everyone how awesome you are,
Right.
which I talk a lot too, but I think I love that is asking questions because people at the end of the day, they want to share what they're excited about and then that spreads, you know, and this is the whole point of these, you know, these interviews, working with amazing women like yourself. I'm learning here, just sitting here. I'm getting another degree here with you. So this
Well,
is
I
great.
learned from you too, and I learned from you as well. I think we all learn from each other,
Yes,
but
in
you
different
have to be
ways,
open to it, right? You
Yeah.
have to be open to taking in that knowledge, and yeah.
No, this is amazing. So before we finish, one last question. There's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs out there, and I think it's really important that we hear from you. What's one piece of advice? I know you probably have a ton, but what's one thing that's really helped you as an entrepreneur hustling for yourself that you can impart with the listeners today?
Well, there are so many things, I suppose. I think one thing I've learned over time is to live your brand. So when I say that, I mean, when you wake up in the morning, you need to be the same person then as you are when you go to bed at night. So that means everywhere you are during the day, you look the part, you sound the part. You're not necessarily constantly selling. But you're dressing well. You're dressing in the way that your brand has announced you to be. And so these days, with social media, for instance, if you're at a bar and you have a few too many drinks, that's going to happen to anybody. Be aware.
Yeah.
Your brand is.
Yeah.
Did your brand say that you lose control and you raise your voice and you act a little silly? It didn't. So I think all of that cuts into what you're trying to do. So I have felt over time that I need to probably look fairly decent every day. I don't know who I'm going to run into, and I need to be open to whatever's going to come at me that day, but I'm going to be that same person, and my manners will be intact in the morning, and they will be intact before I go to sleep at night. I think, and same on,
right?
and you take that with you online, so everything feeds into the same portal, and it becomes you, and so that people know when they talk to Claire, they know what they're getting.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it, and I'm so grateful to have you on. And I know all these things. It's going to take some time. I'm going to watch it again and learn even more. And I hope that we can have you back and you can share other things with the Claire Closet. And I'm a hugger, so I hope.
I love hugging.
Okay. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, and I kind of want to get close to the kids.
Thank you, Claire. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.